Before we get properly into this video, I'd like to announce that me and my lovely girlfriend will be doing a white pilling animal-based stream this Friday as a small charity event for the largest animal shelter in North Wales. If you would like more information and to be kept up to date on this, please join our Discord. The link is down in the description. Now back to our regular programming. Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this, the Clown Decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And as we find ourselves firmly in the midsection of this disaster of a decade, we are actually starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel, you know, some good news is typically being drip-fed through. Things that make you say, I can see how things are now going to get better. Because for once in our lives, it appears that politicians are actually learning their lesson. And yes, we are going to be focusing on the Tories today, because ministers regret ousting Boris Johnson as MPs prime for a comeback. The Times have been given a list of red wall Tories who rue voting against charismatic leader. Because, as I like to constantly remind everyone, thanks to the Sue Gray report, and trust me, we'll be going into that Sue Gray report a little bit later, and the whole ordeal with the parties during COVID, of which Boris Johnson was actually only charged for joining one, and it was one in which he was working with all those people all day anyway, and it was a after-works drinks do that wasn't even very long. It was reported that the Prime Minister oversaw one of the biggest corruption scandals known to man, which was people breaking the COVID lockdown rules that they put in place anyway, which, I'm not going to lie to you, everyone was doing anyway. And so I'm just one of those realistic people that says, look, I know they put the rules in, but I really don't care they were breaking rules that everyone was breaking anyway. But as you can see from this graph from Westminster voting intentions, we can see that the Tories started to lose it to Labour around the time this was becoming big news in 2022. And from this graph you can see that there's not really any recovery. In fact, you see a big downturn around the end of 2022 going into 2023. That is when Liz Truss comes in to power, has her 40 days in power, and no one wants to vote for her because everyone was told it was her fault the economy crashed, even though I don't know what the hell a Prime Minister can do in 40 days to crash an economy. And then, of course, Rishi Sunak comes in and there's absolutely no recovery whatsoever. In short, the Tories ousted Boris Johnson for being anywhere between 1% and 5% behind the Labour Party with voting intentions, only to then have a consistent 15 to 30 point trail behind. Really, the decision to oust Boris Johnson was nothing short of a disaster. And look, I'd prefer it if Liz Truss stayed in charge. I would be fine with ousting Boris Johnson for Liz Truss. Because I think with any leader in charge, you would see the Tory party lose the next election anyway, because no one trusts them. And the only way they can have the internal reformation or revolution, whatever you want to call it, is by being out of power for a few years. Now, we're going to see plenty of cultural problems under Labour, but luckily I think the economy isn't going to completely tank. So hopefully we will have a rough 5 years with Labour, probably even less if they completely screw up the cultural side of things, and you'll hopefully see a revolution within the Tory party, making them a lot more based. And we're going through today why that's probably going to be the case. But first, back to the ousting Boris Johnson regret. Ministers are among more than a dozen Red Wall MPs who have privately admitted to colleagues that they regret ousting Boris Johnson as leader, as insiders said Conservative Party bosses would block any attempt by the former PM to return before the election. Johnson's spokesman declined to comment on speculation that he could be on his way back, insisting he is focusing on writing his book on Shakespeare. They denied suggestions that Johnson is plotting a return to frontline politics by teaming up with Farage and the Reform Party, the successor to the Brexit Party. Richard Tice, leader of Reform and the most useless person on planet Earth, given that really Reform should be within the opening to fill up that juicy centre-right side of politics, also refuted the idea, saying that there was no way on earth we were doing a deal with toxic Tories. Which honestly is probably a good idea. I think it would be bad actually to get Boris Johnson in on any sort of political party at the moment. I think his name is just too toxic for normie voters out there who think that he is literally the devil for breaking his own rules. So leave him as a pariah. I think the time has passed for the Tories to try and keep him in. I honestly think they'd be in a better position if they kept him in, but that better position would still be more than likely losing to Keir Starmer. Honestly, there's no chance of any sort of right-wing or centre-right government getting in at any point soon. You are going to have to grit your teeth through a few years of Labour. It's the clown decade after all, you should have expected things to get worse. The Times have been given a list of names of more than a dozen MPs elected in 2019 who were among those to call for Johnson to quit as Prime Minister in July last year but now regret the decision. They include Lee Anderson, the Deputy Chairman of the Tory party, and the Minister Gareth Bacon. Other Red Wall Tory MPs who are understood to have told colleagues they regret calling for Johnson to quit include Nick Fletcher, David Evanet, Chris Lodger and Ben Bradley, who insisted that changing their leader now would be nuts. People don't vote for divided parties. We've got what we've got. We need to make the best of it, Bradley added. A Red Wall MP said, there are loads of Red Wall MPs who would jump at the chance to have Boris back as leader, even amongst those who called him in to quit. To be honest with you, if I was a Red Wall Tory MP, I'd probably be looking for a job as Johnson was being ousted. I don't think there was any coming back from it. Who do you really think in the Tory party will have been able to actually unite the party and bring it forward to the next election on a stable footing? Because the members wanted Liz Truss simply because her policies directly tried to refute the economic orthodoxy that has got us into this mess in the first place, but obviously the ministers didn't like that, so the ministers put in Rishi Sunak that the members generally didn't want. And he has barely been able to recover any footing when it comes to polling numbers. In other words, they have been more unpopular than ever since they got rid of Boris Johnson. They've literally never been able to recover that loss. So while they do have regret about ousting Johnson, I doubt it really has come down to anything because, as I mentioned before, they may be doing better with Johnson in charge and having never got rid of him, but I really can't see Boris Johnson beating Keir Starmer at this election simply because people like me are tired of voting for the Tories and then getting the opposite of what we expect. You're going to need a hell of a revolution within the Tory party to actually see them seriously try and bring down immigration numbers to net zero or gross tens of thousands. We can take that as well. I should really be more specific than that because that could mean 99,000. And really, I want it below 50,000. And even that's still probably too much for some of you, but oh well. A Conservative source said that the party headquarters would block Johnson standing for the party before the next election. There is no clear route, the source said, to Johnson coming back as party leader. An insider also questioned why the Tories would let Johnson stand for a seat when he was too scared to defend Uxbridge and South Ruislip after being suspended from the party this year, and had turned down the chance to contest Mid-Bedfordshire in October. Because as it turns out, over time people start to realise that Sue Gray was probably a Labour Party activist within the civil service rather than this impartial report writer about what actually happened with the Downing Street parties. I mean, that's not even a joke, by the way. Everything that comes out about Sue Gray seems to just show that she was a blatant Labour Party activist. I mean, not only was she invited by Sir Keir Starmer to become Labour Chief of Staff and then accept it, we also had this lovely bit of news. Son of Labour Chief of Staff Sue Gray to stand for party as London MP. Liam Conlon is selected for the new Beckenham and Peng constituency in the southeast of capital. Before I get all the comments saying, oh, that's not how you pronounce it, yes, I did just check. It's actually pronounced Penge. I apologise, I'm from the north, and I don't really care, I just want to avoid the comments. The son of Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff Sue Gray has been selected to stand as a Labour candidate at the next general election. Liam Conlon will run to become an MP in the Buckingham and Penge constituency in south east London in the election expected to take place in 2024. Yes, that is almost a certainty that there will be one this year. He tweeted, "Thank you everyone who supported me and engaged me in this process. The past weeks have shown the incredible potential of our new local party. Look forward to campaigning to win Beckenham and Penge together." I've just realised I've been saying Buckingham. Maybe it's just the northern brain in me. Maybe I just really want to annoy southerners today. The seat is set to be newly created under the recent boundary review. And it is quite amazing how all this is happening. Not only does the person who is supposed to be an impartial civil servant write a damning report against Boris Johnson, and I'm not even saying that it was all completely unfair. I think any report coming out of that was going to be showing Boris Johnson in a bad light, but I have no doubt in my mind that Sue Gray pushed her finger down on the scales to make it somewhat unfair on Boris Johnson's side of things. Because not only has she got a cushy forever job at the Labour Party, she's also managed to get a cushy job for her son as well. This is a pretty textbook case of corruption, and I am shocked that it's actually not been investigated. But this is the type of blatant corruption within the civil service we're seeing at the moment. I mean, I could do a whole video on how the Home Office has such corruption within it, it will just completely frustrate any sort of policy that is attempted to put through that stops any sort of reduction in migration or even the stopping of illegal migration. But we're focusing on the fall of the Tories at the moment, so I'll leave that for another video. Because the Tories really are well and truly in the mud, and if you ask me, it is a completely deserved result of promising to fix main issues via reducing immigration, having less of the climate cultist green policy guff, reducing taxes and benefits, all this basic stuff that anyone who is remotely centre-right wants. They promise in their manifesto, or at least signal towards, and then just carry on essentially being Labour, so much so that now even Keir Starmer is flanking the Tories to the right on things like the tax burden and even immigration. So at least in some ways they've had the effect of lurching Labour to the right, but on the other hand, I don't trust Labour is going to be any better. I don't trust that while they're signalling to the right, they are going to actually do anything to solve the issue. And I think the news today is really reflecting that. Public have turned against Rishi Sunak's handling of pandemic, poll shows. PM to face COVID inquiry with public opinion 2-1 against him. So despite the fact that he literally gave out free money during the pandemic, people are now having to reap the consequences of that action and are not liking the fact that inflation is still sky high. Despite the fact he said he halved it, even though the government can literally do nothing about inflation, it's all the Bank of England's problem. The cost of living crisis still looms, though. To be fair, it's still a cost of decadence crisis. People are just used to having very cushy lives. Twice as many people now think Rishi Sunak handled the pandemic badly than well. A poll was revealed before the Prime Minister's crucial day of evidence to the COVID inquiry. More than half, 52% of those asked in a YouGov survey for The Times, said Sunak's flagship Eat Out to Help Out scheme was a bad idea, with just a third, 32%, saying it was a good idea. I don't know how anyone thought it was a good idea. I don't know anyone that actually used it. All the Eat Out to Help Out scheme was that the government would make your bill half price to try and encourage you to go back to pubs and restaurants, when really all anyone ever wanted to do during the entire pandemic was literally go back to the pub. But the government was restricting that by saying if you're going to go to a pub, you need to have a substantial meal for it to be a legitimate reason to go. And then a literal Scotch egg was apparently a substantial meal. The whole reaction to COVID, as this COVID inquiry is showing, but nobody is talking about, literally no media organisation is talking about, is just the fact that the government was panicking and the civil service were really in charge, and so you get these really, really stupid policies that it turns out weren't even very popular anyway. In fact, it's even worse than that, as the article says. The Eat Out to Help Out scheme didn't even apply to alcoholic drinks and only lasted for 12 days. When really you've got an entire country saying we want to help out the hospitality sector by getting absolutely off our face drunk with other people in a public place, because it's what being English is about. And the government was saying no for a good chunk of 2020. There are even pictures of people having pints in the pouring rain and floods because they missed going to the pub that much. Do you really think people needed to be encouraged to go out to eat at restaurants and pubs? And this article even keeps showing us how the civil service and government officials really are just the enemy of having a prosperous country and society. Messages reveal as part of the inquiry showed that government scientists referred to him as Dr. Death, the Chancellor, over concerns about his push to keep the economy active while leading the Treasury. And you know what? I can believe that Rishi Sunak was trying to push to keep the economy open and running. I can believe that Rishi Sunak had the foresight to see that this inflation was going to be an issue, and that giving a load of free money out with basically no productivity going on was a really bad idea for the economy. But obviously, if you're being called Dr. Death and being encouraged every which way and every department is against you, you are obviously going to make stupid choices in the end. We have the worst incentives for government. Sunak is also expected to face a tough line of questioning from Hugo Keith KC, the lead counsel of the inquiry, over his failure to produce any of his WhatsApp messages from his time as Chancellor. Yes, I do think Rishi Sunak is trying to hide his involvement in all this. No, I do not think it is going to be particularly any worse than anyone else's WhatsApp messages. He told the inquiry that he had changed his phone several times over the last 3 years and does not have access to his messages as they were not backed up. A source who worked closely with Sunak during the COVID pandemic says he's going to get absolutely slaughtered over his failure to provide these WhatsApp messages. Well, the whole COVID inquiry is just a slaughter. All it is a show trial to say, oh my god, look at all these government officials. They were terrible and not listening to the scientists, while the scientists all rewrite history, claiming that herd immunity was never a backed up by science position that the government only held out of a want to kill old people, which isn't true. Herd immunity was the first suggestion that the government scientists came up with. And really this whole thing is literally just there to throw the Tories under the bus even more. But to be honest, at this point, I don't really care because the Tories aren't delivering anything I want. So let them be destroyed because it will make it easier for a much better party and leader to rise from the ashes of the 20% of the vote they are lucky if they are going to pick up next election. And what might that revolution look like, I hear you ask? Well, Nigel Farage returning to politics days after placing third in I'm a Celebrity. The man came third in a popularity contest with a bunch of mainstream celebrities, which just goes to show you that actually he is a very friendly and popular man. And that is one thing we are definitely missing from the front line of politics. And yes, he did get a boatload of money from doing this as well. I'm sure he was well incentivised to do this, but the reality of the situation is I think he's realising that he is actually a very, very popular man. According to reports, Farage is expected to set out his plan for returning to his political career after leaving the jungle. Having previously refused to deny whether he would like to run for PM, Farage is said to be using his newfound fame as a stepping stone back into Westminster. A source close to the former MEP told the Mail Online, "The coming months are going to be huge for Nigel. He wants a way back into politics and he's going to tell his fans of this in the coming days. His views are going on a show like I'm a Celeb means that he has shone into millions of living rooms across Britain where the viewers can see him warts and all, and they can also learn of his political opinions." And honestly, it has been very good for Nigel's image. He has come across as a very friendly father figure within the camp, really. He is constantly referred to as the camp dad. And pretty much everyone who has been in the jungle and had post-jungle interviews and talked about Farage whenever he's come up, they've all said that he's a really nice guy. It's hugely helped his image. The only person that doesn't really like him post-jungle is a young black YouTuber called Nella Rose, who is an immigrant. I believe she's from Belgium, and is of course relatively woke on a few issues. They had an argument about immigration and about cultural appropriation, and she lost it both times. She doesn't seem like the type that copes well with disagreements. In short, one of the most unpopular people, as she was one of the first people to go via the vote, is the only person that doesn't particularly like Nigel Farage. So even the people that did have huge disagreements with him, like the Frenchman Fred from First Dates, I can't remember his surname off the top of my head, they had obviously disagreements about Brexit, but still got on really well. If nothing else, it does show that you can get on with anyone in the world if you just treat them like a person. So hopefully as well, you will see less divides on a political basis. You will see people actually having a conversation about politics and not coming away hating the other person for it. Hopefully that'll help. But really the main part of this is that Farage is clearly a popular man. Having him back in politics, it's just going to be a win for whatever party he's part of. So the Tories naturally are quite open about this. Rishi Sunak said in the past he is open to Farage joining the Tory party. The problem is that that's probably going to invite an entire revolution to make it more like UKIP than the Cameron-era Tories that is basically just New Labour pretending that it's sensible with the economy. So yes, Farage would definitely be an improvement on that. And it's not just sources close to Farage where he's implying he's coming back to make a big political comeback and save Britain. He's openly saying it in his own interviews.
What we all want to know 30 years on is, are you seeking to use your I'm a Celebrity journey in order to rejoin the Conservatives and maybe finally get into the UK Parliament? Because you've tried lots of times before.
I tried lots of times before, you're quite right. I also won 2 national elections in European elections, leading 2 different parties, something nobody in history has ever done before, so I can do with a little bit less of that sort of commentary.
I really do have to appreciate Farage for directly addressing the whole always a failed politician subtext of a lot of questions and comments he gets, because he really probably is one of the most successful politicians when it comes to the 21st century. Quite literally, the man single-handedly got Brexit done, which he was quite clearly hoping would have been the big open door to then get what Britain has been voting and asking for quite some time, which is less immigration and having Parliament be completely sovereign again. But he's realised as time goes on that, well, really, we have bigger issues than just the European Parliament. It's deeper within our own political ecosystem than he realised, and so that's why he's coming back. But as I say, to imply that because he failed to get into Parliament he is a failed politician, it's just a ridiculous thing to say. He was clearly successful. He got into the European Parliament a number of times, directly took on that establishment, and managed to get Britain out of the EU. Like, that's an amazing portfolio of political successes.
Look, I've literally just come out of the jungle. I've had a shave.
Touchy, Nigel.
I've got changed.
That was a bit touchy.
Well, yes,
That was a
okay.
bit touchy.
If you poke me with a, if you poke me with a stick, I'll poke back. Don't worry about that.
I hope this is also again a good example of how Nigel Farage is actually a friendly, tough but fair father figure, because he's not taking this guff from Ed Balls of all people, whose political career peaked by getting into Gordon Brown's cabinet as he was falling out of office. I'm not saying he's not a successful politician by any stretch of the imagination, but to try and claim that he had any sort of better success in government than Nigel Farage of all people, then you've got another thing coming. But Nigel Farage is playing it off as friendly banter, as Ed Balls is also trying to, but I'd say to a less successful degree.
Look, I've got to say, I'm really sorry about the Matt Hancock thing.
He was
really
only stating
sorry.
facts, Nigel.
I'm really sorry about the Matt Hancock thing.
See, Farage is just having a good laugh about it. It's a very friendly face. It's the type you do want to see in politics. It's a big reason Boris Johnson was so popular. He just seemed like a really friendly, funny guy. And for some reason, the leftists absolutely hate that.
I am looking at a Conservative government that is in total shambles, facing tomorrow effectively a confidence vote on an issue that affects every single living human being in our country, namely immigration on a level that never happened even during Tony Blair's days.
Yeah, it's actually quite amazing we've not reached 1 million net a year, but it's well over 1 million gross. I mean, it's just, I'm a broken record at this point. We know it's an absolutely ridiculous amount of immigrants coming in. Tory party prime ministers have been saying that it's a ridiculous amount coming in, even when it was about 200,000 net a year, and that they want to get it right down to tens of thousands or whatever. They want to reduce it, and they never have. Farage is just pointing that out like everybody knows anyway, but for some reason it seems like this massive, ridiculous lie being perpetrated by the right wing. Like a lot of things, clearly, it's the left wing making a culture war assault and the right wing getting defensive about it and then being told that they are making a culture war attack. When really, the right wing is just full of normal people who want to live normal lives, and that's the end of it.
Rishi is a lame duck walking. The Conservative Party are headed for total defeat. As to whether I have a future in politics, I have no idea at this moment in time. But what I would say is never say never, and our country needs, actually, people at the top with some firm guidance as to where we're going to go in the future. At the moment, we are rudderless, and I don't see a Labour Party with the strength to get us out of this mess.
I mean, that's not him saying, yes, I'm definitely coming back to politics, but Farage is good at this political flair. You know, it's always been said that politics is just show business for ugly people. And no offence, Nige, but you aren't exactly going to be winning any supermodel contests anytime soon. But my God, you are very good at showing off that showbiz flair. And this is exactly what this is. It's not giving out any answers like, yeah, of course I'm going to come back. I need to do this, that or the other. No, he's saying, we need to do... He's basically giving away his intentions. He wants the country to have a direction, obviously in a direction he wants. He knows he has the popularity and probably even the power eventually when he does rejoin the Tory party to revolutionise the Tory party and turn it into an election-winning force for ending immigration, ending wokery, political correctness, whatever you want to call it, having sensible laws, taking on the ridiculous things Tony Blair has put in, or the European laws that make no sense, the Supreme Court, reforming the Lords to actually work as a competent second chamber rather than just being a chamber where a bunch of party donors can end up earning £300 a day just by signing a piece of paper and having toast that costs 5 pence. The man has a vision, and what he's saying is he wants someone with a vision at the top of British politics. If that's not him saying that he's going to be getting in on British politics somehow in the future, whether that be through the Tories or Reform, I don't know what he's telling you. So look forward to, after the next election, Farage returning to politics, because genuinely, I think the time is only after the next election. He should keep his head down, probably say, tacitly vote Reform, because every other party is just not going to do anything you expect. I should rephrase that. They are going to do exactly what you expect, which is absolutely nothing that you want, but every single party is going to put in their manifesto that they will try and reduce immigration or something along those lines. And it'll be the same with every other policy. I mean, if the Tories were real about fighting wokery or leftism in all of their institutions, first thing they do is get rid of the Equality Act. First thing they do is get rid of the Supreme Court. But they're not doing either of those things, so don't expect anything now. But do expect the election after the 2024 election to be very, very entertaining and funny. It's unironically probably going to be like 2016 all over again, which is good news for me because that means a lot of content to be made, and good news for you because I get to make that content. And even better news because Farage will be like Drake rising from the ashes and saving Britain from foreign ideologies, peoples, and religions, and there is nothing I want more for this country. Anyway, that is everything I had for you today, so once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.